Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to have you guys here and excited to or introduce to you all Megan Brunton from Journey UMC. Did I say your last name right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yay, okay. So, Megan, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Journey UMC, and how you began this journey to virtual choir training.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to share some of the stuff that I have kind of figured out. I'm in the same boat as everyone else. I am not a professional anything when it comes to video or audio. I am a music director and a choir director and a pianist that had a little bit of computer skills. And when the pandemic hit and we switched to online worship, I found that I was the most qualified of the least qualified people to be doing this. I not only put together our choir music, but I compile our whole online worship service every Sunday. So all of those videos get sent to me. We do actually small group work more than we do choir pieces, but I have done one large choir piece since the pandemic. It is a little bit more work. But on a weekly basis, I'm doing 2 to 3 new small group songs every week. And I try and have about 4 people in those because we want to keep our musicians doing stuff too. And our congregation likes to see those familiar faces. So I am a Mac user. So predominantly all of this information will be programs that come free on Mac. There is one paid program that I use, although I am a teacher by trade and I'm not super rich. So I looked for a program that was affordable as well as really user friendly, I felt like. So we'll be talking about that today. That's the Movavi. But a lot of the other stuff I use is things that already come on Mac computers free, like iMovie and Garageband and Keynote, as well as some of the extra above and beyond things I've ordered are things that kind of go with my iPhone or that interface really well with the Mac computers. So if you're a Windows person, this might not have as much impact on you, but for Mac people, ton of good stuff.
Oh, thank you. And that reminds me, so some of these things, if you're a Mac user or an iPad user, some of these programs would be available on an iPad as well, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, so Megan's going to get us started in our training, but just before we start, I want to remind everyone that you can type in your questions in the chat area. And I forgot to ask you, Megan, if you'll be addressing the questions as you go along. I'm guessing maybe not because it's kind of hard to see your chat questions when you're sharing a screen as a presenter in a webinar. But don't worry, guys, we will be addressing them after Megan's done with her training. And so I'll read out the questions. And if you have additional questions, or maybe after you typed it up, you decided it doesn't quite cover my question, just you'll be able to raise your hand and I'll turn on your audio and you can be heard and ask your question that way. All right, it's 11:33. Megan, go ahead and take it away. And Deborah, we had a training on Final Cut Pro, which is the PC version of video editing. We also have some other step-by-step tutorials that are available on the Worship Online, the virtual choir section of the webpage or website. And it's going to give you some more instructions on how to do some of this stuff on software that is available for PCs and or Macs. So today's training is on Mac products. So we won't really be addressing PC questions here.
Although I will say that Movavi, the video editing software, the one that I did purchase, they have it's downloadable on Windows and Mac as well. So that is a product that can be used on both.
Keep in mind that if she talks about any shortcuts or key keys that you would need to use to get to a shortcut in Movavi. It might be a little bit different on your PC if you download Movavi, but it will be possible to do the same thing on a PC.
So I have a little handout that is just more so for you to make notes on. I tried. So I, like I said, kind of went back and forth between a couple of different programs. When the pandemic hit, I had to start with what I knew. My biggest recommendation for anyone starting out with the video editing and the audio editing, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. I like things to be really good and really perfect all the time, and you can spend hours trying to perfect things, or going back and redoing it again. When you're starting out, if things aren't exactly synced up, that's okay. If you need to start out with maybe just working on one new video and building your arsenal, building your library, do that. Where I'm at now, I've really built up over the months of doing this. I've started with maybe one group piece every 2 weeks in the beginning and had a lot of soloists, which is a little easier to do when you're video recording. So um, tips for the new video editor. I said start slowly, talk with your worship team and pastor to set realistic expectations. A lot of times for people that don't know anything about video editing, they think, oh, it's easy. You just take this and you paste it into here. And so really communicating with my pastor and my musicians, things like deadlines, how far in advance I needed them to get me the videos, how to film their videos and what to look out for. These seemed like things that were very common sense to me, but I had to remember that people that didn't know what I was doing, they didn't know these things. If you're using iMovie, I cannot stress enough, invest in an external hard drive. So before we even get into talking about iMovie and GarageBand and Movavi, I will say that iMovie is my favorite. It can do tons of really great stuff. One of the curses and blessings of iMovie is that anything that you pull into iMovie, it saves a copy of it into the program. So for example, if I copy a video I have of a guitar player from my desktop into iMovie, iMovie duplicates that file. So now instead of having one video of my guitar player sitting on my desktop and taking up X amount of space, it's now taking up double that amount of space because it's in the program iMovie and also on the desktop. I don't have a fancy computer. It doesn't have a ton of storage. So every week I was finding my computer was running slower and slower, and that everything was just piling up. Nowadays with technology, you can buy a 2 GB, 2 TB, whatever hard drive, and they're pretty cheap. So I would purchase one right away and just start storing all of your stuff on there. I actually made a copy of iMovie and moved the whole program onto that flash drive. You can see it right here. I label them with stickers so I know which flash drive goes, or with which external drive goes with which project I'm working on. And I keep all my church stuff on there, and it doesn't slow down my computer any. Working with video and audio, a lot of times big files. So I would say invest in an external hard drive as soon as you can. All right, so the first thing I do during the week is I create a demo track to send out to my musicians. Once I've chosen the song that I'm going to do, if you're doing a choir piece, you can do this as well. But let's say we're doing just a praise song that week. I'll choose my song and I will create a demo track in GarageBand. Okay, so here is GarageBand. It has lots of different layers. In video and audio, we tend to look at things in these layers, and this is one that I've already done. So if you are a piano player, maybe you're just recording with a microphone into GarageBand. I don't think in an hour we're going to have enough time to really get into the nitty gritties of some of this stuff. I am happy to meet with anybody who wants to meet with me. I've put my email out there if anyone wants additional help. But basically, you're going to add in layers to GarageBand by hitting this little plus sign up here. And then it gives you some options of how you want to add in those layers. Probably the most popular for people is going to be record using a microphone or an input. I have some microphones that I've purchased that plug directly into my computer. They're called USB microphones. In my handout, I've linked to a couple of them that I use. The Behringer C1U microphone. Do I have it sitting here? Yes, it looks like this. It's a little microphone, and then the end is literally just a USB that plugs directly into your computer. But I, as a piano player, I have a keyboard, and I actually prefer to use MIDI. So if you're familiar with MIDI, that's another great way to do it. So I create my instrumental track in there, and then I create my vocal track with just me. So let's see. Here's one with my piano track, and let's use Adam's voice as an example. So. From the breaking of the dawn to the setting of. Okay, so I've got my instrument tracks up here and my vocal track down there. And the reason it's important to have this demo track is that all of my other singers and instrumentalists are going to line up to this track. When I created the track for the choir piece that we worked on, I actually utilized my brother, and I had him sing a bass and a tenor part, just like a practice track that I would make maybe for my choir when we were in regular session. And I sent a different track to each singer. So the sopranos got a track that had just the piano part and the soprano part to sing along with. The altos got that. You'll have to decide what your musicians need and what you send them in that demo track, but it is important that everyone is recording to the same track initially. That way your timing all lines up later. So once again, I'm in GarageBand for this, getting in an instrument and some kind of vocal, whether that be through MIDI or through using my recording. I will say that at one point with a choir video we did, I ordered from J.W. Pepper, and I sometimes use their orchestral tracks, which either come to you in a CD, or if it's very modern, you can download the MP3. And sometimes using that and just dragging and dropping that into GarageBand can serve as your background track for everyone to line up to, and that's far less work, which is kind of exciting. So I've got my demo track. I then email out to my musicians the MP3. And if you've never used GarageBand before, once you are done recording in your instrument and your vocals, you go to Share, Export Song to Disk, and you can export it as an MP3, which is probably the most common file to send to people. And it's small. I can usually send an MP3 through email without having to upload it to a drive or anything. Gmail will let me do that. File size is something that you have to take into consideration when sending videos and recordings. Okay, so my musicians have my demo track. So now what do they do with it? So the instructions that I give to them is you are probably going to want 2 devices. Sometimes my singers or my instrumentalists will use a phone and their computer. So they'll put in headphones and they will listen to the MP3 that I gave them of my demo track or my demo song or your choir song. And then phones make the best cameras. Phones, I think, are almost better than our computer cameras nowadays with the quality that they can get. They can make it as simple or as complicated as they want. I have some older ladies in our choir that aren't very technical, and so they just open up their camera, they place it on a bookshelf, and they film themselves singing while listening to the recording on their headphones. What this then gives me is a recording of just their voice and just their face, or if they're an instrumentalist, just their guitar and just their body without hearing that track in the background. And that's really important for mixing later, because I want all of these parts to be separate and individual so that I can play with the volumes and things later. So training them to send me these videos was a whole nother thing, and you will have to find out what works for your singers. Some people know how to use Google Drive. Some people you'll have to train. Some people were able to, they had iPhones and they could text their video to me through the cloud. It was different with every person, honestly, based on what they knew how to do. I have been in the habit now of using kind of the same 4 or 5 musicians every week. Even my choir people, once we've done a couple and they had a system down, it was a lot easier. But just be prepared and leave yourself time that it's going to take a couple of days, maybe going back and forth. Did you get that? Did it work? Did it download? No, it didn't. Let's try something else. And that process can be a little frustrating. So, okay, we've recorded our demo track. We've sent it along with our sheet music out to our musicians. They have recorded their video, and we've come up with a system for them to send it back to me. I'm going to backtrack a minute and say that if you haven't already tried recording, there are some tried and true tips to tell your instrumentalists or your singers. Things like record horizontally and not vertically. So horizontal, like your TV looks, not vertical. No one's TV looks like that. Being careful of background sounds, even things like fans, or I have a woman who records every week for me, and she has the cutest dog, but I can always hear the nails of the dog on the floor walking around behind her in the video. So I have to remind her, please put the dog in another room when you record. Things like light, you want the light to be on you. If you are sitting in front of a beautiful window behind you, you're going to look like you're in the witness protection program. So make sure you communicate some of these tips to your singers. And the biggest thing is to tell them to watch their video before they send it to you. Have them listen and proofread for some of those extra sounds before it gets to you. That way you'll have less to fix. Okay, so now you have your video of all your instrumentalists. Here comes the fun part. And like I said, there might be, I'm sure there are maybe better or more efficient ways to do this, but this is kind of what I had available to me and what I had been working with. So I'm going to share my screen again here. I'm going to pull up Movavi. Okay, so like I said, Movavi is a paid program. I picked it because it was really intuitive. I will warn you, my computer today is being a little bit slow. And so there's so many things open right now with the Zoom and Garageband and things. So if there's a little bit of a lag, I apologize. So I'm going to start from the beginning here. When you open up Movavi, it looks like this. You won't have anything in your media bin. On the left-hand side here, just like we saw with GarageBand, you have your layers. So we've got video layers. They look like they have little bits of film on the left. We have audio layers and we have text layers. I always start by adding in just a black background where I can kind of start and play with. So I go to backgrounds, I select black, and I just drag it onto my first video layer, and I'm going to make this longer. Here's my time index across the top. I don't care how long it is, just a black background to start with. Okay, so then I'm going to add in my audio track. I'm going to use a demo audio track that I had already made, Great in Power. and I'm just dragging it from where the file is straight into the program. If I try and drag it into a video and it's an audio, it'll drop it into the audio. It won't allow me to do that. And then you can layer in your videos. So for example, here is a video that Danielle sent me, Great in Power. Looked like this originally.
Whole earth, praise him.
Just her singing. She's listening to it with her
Praise
headphones.
him.
Nobody likes the way they sing by themselves, by the way. It took a while for them to get comfortable with filming themselves. I had to tell them, it's going to sound good, I promise. Okay, so then I take her video and I drag it into the video. Okay, here's where it takes a little bit of trial and error. So I rely on these sound waves down here on the bottom to align my video sound with the sound that I have mixed in Garageband. So I can see where she starts singing right here. And I can tell on my larger track that there's a spike, the sound gets louder here. So that's where my vocals come in on my large track. So I'm actually going to shorten hers and try and line up where she's singing and where my singers start on my track. And then I'm going to play it and see if I did it correctly. Down here, I've got scale, so I can view it really small or really large. The more I'm zoomed in, the easier this is for me to tell and to line up. So I think those two are about on top of each other. This is where I said, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. I'm going to make it as close as I possibly can. Cool, that's pretty close. Now I just go in and I highlight where her vocals are, and I'm deleting the vocals that she sent me. And now she is singing with the track and you can hear her. So how to create these kind of boxes where we've got a bunch of different people. I can now kind of section her off. So I select her video. I go into overlay. And there's tons of options. If I've got a duo, I can do side by side, left, right. Most of the time I'm working with 4 people, and it'll kind of put her in a corner so that I can layer other people on. Then I go ahead and add another person or another instrumentalist, add another video track, and I repeat this process multiple times. So let me show you kind of what the finished product looks like with all the videos. So here is this 4 square video with different singers. And once again, it's only this little box that I've used Movavi just to get those singers in that little box. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm using Movavi for. Let's go and talk about how I do the rest of it. You can see that there's some lyrics and all sorts of things on there. Okay, so we've sent out the audio track to our singers. They've sent back their tracks. In order to create the mix of the audio, I need to separate the sound from the video that, let's say, Danielle's video that she sent me. So here's the file that Danielle sent me, Great in Power. It's got her singing and her video.
And all that's above.
I'm going to take that and I'm going to separate it in iMovie. So here's iMovie. When you open it up, you're going to create a new movie. And I have some libraries to choose from. So you'll just kind of say where you want to save it to. Oh, the computer's thinking. Okay, so here's iMovie. In order to separate Danielle's video from her sound so that I can use her video to make the video and the sound to make the sound, I just drag and drop my file into iMovie. So there she is. Right now I've got the audio attached to the video. If I right click, or on your Mac, it would be Control click, it pulls up some options. I want to detach the audio from her video. So now I've detached the audio. That's one way you can do it. You can also just share the file as an MP3. Share file. Oh wait, it's still loading the video. Share file. Okay, so now I've got some options. Do I want to share it as a video and audio, or just audio only? Maybe I just want her audio. So then I'm going to label this Danielle audio. Great in power. And then I've got her audio. So in order to create our mix, to create something that sounds really good, I'm taking the audio from my different singers and I'm layering it into GarageBand. So here is, let me open a better one. Here's Great in Power. Here it comes. There we go. And here's all my different layers. So Danielle's vocal would get dropped right in here. I can get rid of this. And same thing. You can create a new layer. Record using microphone, that's fine. I have a layer now with nothing in it. So I'm going to take her audio, Great in Power, and just drag it into GarageBand. Like I said, if you're going to work with these programs, it's probably going to take a little bit more than a 30-minute session, but I just want you to be able to see what's possible and how kind of intuitive this is visually to do. So now same thing, I can see here in my, in the visuals where she starts singing. I'm going to try and line her up with my demo track. So I'm Megan. Here's the original, ooh. There we go. Here's the original file that I recorded with me singing. You can see where my voice starts. So I want to try and line her up with me. So I can drag her up here. And I'm just going to try and line up our audio where I start and where she starts. If I click the headphones here, I can listen to just us together. So we're close. There we go. Now I can see what that sounds like with the piano that I recorded earlier. So I've done this and I've added in my other two singers as well. I just repeated the process, and here are two other singers. And I've done the same thing. I've just separated their vocals from their video. I've then dragged the vocals into GarageBand with my different layers and just tried the best I could to line up. So now I've got this nice, what we call your audio mix of things. Things that I really like in GarageBand that help the singer sound nice. Adding in a little bit of reverb or a little bit of ambiance. You can get there on the top left next to this scissors is this little control panel. Let's see how that changes the sound. So let's listen to just Danielle's sound here. If I add reverb, just gives it kind of like a nice echo. The ambiance gives it a little more depth. So by herself, would I put that up as a soloist? Maybe not, but add it into the whole group with other people, kind of adjust the volumes, bringing out the parts you like, and then you've got something really awesome. As you get more into GarageBand, you can play around with changing the instruments, adding different things. For example, I don't have a drummer, but in GarageBand, you can add in drums yourself. So here is with drums that I kind of manufactured in GarageBand, which for a contemporary service gives it a nice extra layer. But like I said, start with what you know. Maybe you're just doing a piano and your singers, or you're not even recording the piano part. You're dragging in the MP3 that you've bought off of JW Pepper. Whatever makes this easiest for you, and then each week kind of add in something new. Maybe this next week I'm going to play around with some filters on my vocalists. GarageBand has different filters where you can change what they sound like. So here's Danielle's sound again. Let's listen just to her. If I choose voice, I've got some different options. I can make her vocals sound more bright, and all I do is click this and GarageBand automatically changes the vocals for me. I can give it more of a classical vocal sound, just clicking classical vocal with her track selected, and it's changing the sound automatically for me. It's got some weird ones on here. What's a funny one? Telephone vocal. You can hear a big change here. I don't know why you'd ever want to use that, but it's there. The point is that GarageBand has a lot of built-in things to kind of make it sound really professional, even if you don't necessarily know how. Like I said, I just dragged in the audio, and now I'm just clicking these different options to change how it sounds. Okay, so I've got my files layered on top of each other. It's trial and error, looking at the file waves, trying to line things up. I've adjusted the volumes here the way I like them. And then I'm exporting my final mix as an MP3. So share, export song to disk, and I'm getting this Great in Power one final track with all of my mixes in it. It's that recording that I use in Movavi to line up my singers to. So then once I've added in my 4 other singers, I get kind of that square Great in Power. Let's see if I can find it. Yep, here we go. So here's the musician square that I've created in Movavi. I've taken my GarageBand audio and I've added in my different singers there in Movavi. Okay, Keynote is another great free program on Mac. If you've ever used PowerPoint, Keynote is like the free version of PowerPoint. I use this to do all of the lyrics slides or to create any ribbons or screens that you see. So for example, on this Great in Power, only the small square with the singers was created in Movavi. Everything else you see, the background, the lyrics, the title at the bottom was all created in Keynote. And for anybody who wants to save some time, I would be more than happy to send you over the files that I have in Keynote so you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you're going to use that. So Keynote should come free on your Mac. Okay. So I actually reuse the same slides every week. I started out with only a couple, and now I have a ton of slides because, like I said, I do the whole service. This was our opening song a couple of weeks ago. We did The Joy of the Lord. So like any other slide, this is just a bunch of layers on top of each other. So let me start with a blank slide and I can show you how I do this. We've got a blank slide. I'm just adding in a background. This could be a colored background. I like to use free background images off of any background website because I know that there's no payment needed and that the photographer says it's okay to use it. So I'm going to add an image fill as my background. I've already chosen that image and downloaded it from the internet. So if I wanted to choose where I select it from, I can do that. And then I'm adding in a shape for behind my words. So I just go up to the top and I choose shape. I can place it wherever I want it to go. I'll make this really simple. I can choose a color for my shape. And then opacity is what's going to make it kind of look like a nice shadow. So I just move the opacity down. And then I'm typing my lyrics, or usually copying and pasting the lyrics. The joy of the Lord, off of CCLI, if you want people singing along with your video. And then messing with the text over here until it's the way you want it to be. So now I've got my slides. They look something like this. And now I'm going to put it all together in iMovie. So why do I do this in iMovie instead of Movavi? Why do I use two different video programs? Honestly, because iMovie, it seems like, can handle a lot more before it starts to get glitchy. That's the reasoning behind it. But iMovie doesn't have the capability to do the layers that Movavi can do. So like I showed you all the different layers, I created my choir video that had a ton of different people, and it had lots of different layers because you need a different layer for each person. In iMovie, you can only have 2 layers at a time, but because of that, I can create a whole hour-long service or a really intricate video, and it doesn't crash, it doesn't glitch. And I like that it saves all of my information in one place by creating those extra copies. So I make my final product in iMovie. So I've got my slides. I'm going to export my slides as an image. I'll talk about PNGs a little later, but JPEGs or PNG is a great way to export them. And then you're going to have a folder with a bunch of these pictures in them. Okay, so let's see what this looks like in iMovie. So let's see, October 25th. Okay, so in iMovie, anything you drag and drop into here kind of ends up on your screen. So here is the video that I created in Movavi, my 4-person grid. This is the joy of the Lord, actually. And I just took the file, I dragged it and dropped it into iMovie, and now it's a tiny square. It actually shows up like that. It'll show up next to. I've gone in and I've dragged and dropped in my pictures as well from my slides. So here's my pictures. Here's my video from Movavi. And now I'm just going to drop this video on top of my slides. And you have some options. So do I want it to layer over the top nice and big? I can click up here, cutaway. Picture in picture is what I use to kind of drag it around and put it where I want it to go. So now I'm going to arrange that wherever I want it on the screen. When I do our singers videos, I put it over here on the right. And then I just have to go through and listen and line up my slides to their singing. So let's see where the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the. So now I've got my other lyric in here. Let's say I wanted to lengthen this. I could just pull this and make it longer, or pull this and make it shorter to have the lyrics change at a different time. So like I said, all really like visual. I'm layering this on top of here. And I can put it anywhere I want to. Like here I have a scripture, and I've got my scripture as a slide, and her video is just dropped on top of it. So let's look at what is possible as a choir. Here is a choir video we did using Movavi. And this is why I don't do choir videos as much, because you can see that if you're taking the video and you're separating the video and the audio, you're creating your mix, and then you're creating your video and layering those together, that the more people you have and the more parts you have, the more of a time commitment it is to put together. It doesn't mean it's not worth it. I had a ton of fun making this video, but it was a project that took me a couple of weeks. It took the singers obviously more than a couple of weeks to learn and to put their stuff together. So we don't do kind of larger group videos on a weekly basis. That's something that's more of a special, especially with Christmas coming up. This is something that you might consider doing as like a holiday special, because it is more involved. But here's an example of what this finished product can look like with Movavi. And for this video, I didn't create the background track. Like I said, I bought this song off of JW Pepper, and I bought the MP3 recording that went behind them. So in Garageband, when I layered their tracks on top of one another, I just took my MP3 that I bought and I dropped it right in as a layer, and then I added their voices in on top of it.
It's all you got to lean on, but thank God it's all you need. And all the people said amen.
Do their videos line up perfectly 100% with their vocals using this method? No. Could they, if I wanted to take a lot of time and really go in there and play with it a lot? Yes. But once again, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. This is still really enjoyable. Everyone loved it. They thought it turned out great. And it wasn't so distracting that, you know, maybe it's a hair off from their vocals. That's okay. At some point you have to say, this is getting my message across, and it still looks really nice as a finished product. So in order to create these crazy squares in Movavi, let's go back and look at that, and then I'll stop for any crazy questions. I'm just adding in more layers. So once again, if this were my choir piece, down here on the bottom would be the MP3 that I had created in Garageband and dropped in here. And I would just continue to add in more video tracks and drop them in. So there's a video track by Danielle, but I could add in, let's see, Nancy. So here's another video added on top of it. And same thing, I would just try and line up her vocals as best I could with where the vocals are starting. Eventually I want to delete her vocals. And then I can overlay her and drag and drop wherever I want to. I can use the custom squares that they have made, or I can make my own squares. And then I'm just kind of pulling it wherever I want it to go. It doesn't even have to be in squares that are next to each other. You could do like cool designed things if you wanted to. I could have it look like that. And then I just keep adding layers on there, as many components as I want. Okay, sorry if that was a little crazy, but once again, so we've got iMovie, which is great for layering in different words. I use Keynote in order to create those words. I export Keynote as images and add them into iMovie. Movavi, great for layering, for making those squares. And Garageband, obviously, to do the audio. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Like I said, I hope that was a little bit of a taste of kind of what these programs can do and how visually intuitive it can be as far as layers go. Once again, if you want any help with specifics or how to tailor this to what you're doing at your church, I am always more than happy to help. Email, reach out by phone.
I'm not a user of Movavi, GarageBand, or iMovie, so I can appreciate how it might seem pretty overwhelming. I love your point about don't let perfection get in the way of progress. I hope all of you participating today or watching along, and when you watch this recording, that you keep that in mind. Just try it, keep trying. It sounds like the learning curve, that it can seem pretty steep up front, but once you get it started, it might not be too bad, I think. How long would you say it took you from when you first thought of, okay, I'm going to give it a try, to when you created your first video? Both, how long did it take to learn the programs? And then how long does it take to create those projects?
That's a great question. So when you look at the old, I put all of our service videos up on YouTube for Journey United Methodist Church. When you look at the ones back from March, I cringe a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I put that out on the internet for people to see. It was not beautiful. It was not great. I had a little bit of experience already with iMovie. So I couldn't say how long it took to learn that, but I will say that I have tried other programs before. I've tried buying some of the fancier programs and things, and I found those to have kind of a steep learning curve. I think iMovie is a little more meant for the novice. I think it's a little more user friendly in the fact that it really is kind of, I take this file, I drag it onto my screen, and now I can see it there. It's a square, and in my head, I know if I make this square bigger, it does something. If I make it smaller, like you can really see what you're doing when you're messing with it. So I think that iMovie is very user-friendly to new people. Also, there's a ton of reference material out there for iMovie. When you're first learning it, if you have a question, just typing into YouTube, how do I create a transition in iMovie? How do I split a clip in half? You're going to find a lot of very clear information because it's a program that comes freely on Mac and so many people use it. There's a lot of help out there to be easily found with it. And then Movavi, I picked, it's Movavi. And then I also, on that handout that I can get out to you guys, I have links to all of this stuff as well. So you can find it that way too. But Movavi, I felt like, was a really good choice when working with iMovie because they are so similar in their interface. I didn't feel like by getting Movavi, I had to learn a whole new program. It was very much the same. Here are the layers, drag and drop your audio or your video in, line it up the way you want it to be. Everything else is extra. Everything else is, if you want fancy transitions, great. Maybe next week work on your transitions. If you want to mess with making the singers have some reverb, some echo, great. Maybe work with that in the next video you do, and just kind of layer your skills one video at a time. And be forgiving of yourself, have realistic expectations. This week, I'm going to use one singer and one guitar player and one piano player and try and layer those things and make it sound the best I can.
So what would you say was the biggest hurdle for you, and how did you overcome that?
Honestly, my biggest hurdle still is getting other people on the same page that I am. So especially new singers or readers, people turning stuff in a timely fashion, because this does take some time to put together. I would say it's shorter for me now, but when I first started, depending on how perfect I was trying to make it, it could take a couple of hours per song to kind of get everything the way you want it to be, depending on how many layers there are. And at some point, you just have to say, this is it, I'm done, I'm sending it now. There's the cutoff. But each week it gets faster. And I do save all of the songs, reuse things. Like I said, once I had that template for my lyrics, I use the same template for every song now. I don't try and get super creative with it. Once I created that background, I'm just dropping in a new nature image, copying and pasting my new lyrics in there, and exporting it each week. I'm not recreating this wheel every time. And if there are weeks where I know I'm going to be super busy, I'm maybe just like you would in service, right? You want to reuse songs that are familiar. I may be picking a song I had made from 3 months ago and dropping it into service along with one video that I made new from that week. And they're creating this like library of songs that I have to keep using over and over again.
I know you mentioned this during the training, but could you repeat or go into a little more detail? Why did you decide to use iMovie and Movavi? Why not just do it all in iMovie?
Yeah. So like I said, iMovie only, when we're talking about layers, iMovie will only let you have 2 layers at a time. Um, if you want to create these multiple square things, you have to be able to have multiple layers of video all running at once. And I found that Movavi was the right choice for me as far as my learning curve and my price point to create those multiple squares. But there are features in iMovie that I really love. The fact that it saves all my files in one place. This is important because if you're like me and you're not very organized with your filing system, or your computer doesn't have much storage space, I'm constantly moving things around, deleting different files. Let's say I work really hard in February and I create a video, and then I want to go back and edit it and reuse it again in October of this year. If I had pulled a piece of audio or a video into iMovie, and since February I've moved it or I've deleted it or it's in another place on my computer, most programs would say, hey, you have to go find that file or tell me where it is on your computer before you can open this up and work on it. iMovie says, no, I already duplicated that file for you in February. When you made it, it's saved within iMovie. I can access it at any time, even if I have since deleted that file, which, like I said, takes up some extra storage space, but oh, does it save some headaches later. So like I said, I just have an external hard drive to deal with the duplicate storage space that's created within iMovie. But I like that, and also because it's so widely used that there is a lot of help out there for iMovie, and that was another plus for me.
So licensing, I wanted to share just the idea about if you do decide to purchase a track for your live stream, make sure that when you buy the song, that it includes the live streaming license. It might be called, I think it's a web license or internet license, I can't remember. And I've noticed several companies that offer that option. It's included for free, but you do have to click that little check mark to make sure that you have that streaming license included. Otherwise, you could get dinged for using that soundtrack with your recording for live streaming worship. I had a question in another webinar, 2 things. One, for the churches that don't quite have this all put together yet, the question was, would you give us permission to use some of your recordings for our services? I noticed that in yours, you do already have the Journey branding in there. So maybe people wouldn't want to use it for their church, or maybe they would. Just know that Journey UMC has the licensing to stream those songs. And thankfully, Megan, I mean, you look for images that you didn't have to buy, that they're copyright free. So that's taken care of. And you're not using lyric slides from somebody else. You're creating your own. You have the copyright, you've got the streaming license. If you're watching and you're planning on using another church's recordings, make sure that your church has the CCLI streaming license, that all of the audio in their track is their performances and not audio tracks that they purchased. If they did purchase the soundtrack, then your church will need to purchase it as well with the web streaming license attached so that you're covered that way. And then check it on their images. If they're using images in the background that they purchased, then you'll also need to purchase those images to be able to legally stream them. So Megan, if any of our participants need some help right now, in another webinar, our trainer was available for hire to create some videos for churches. I don't know if it's for a temporary amount of time or indefinitely or whatever. Would you be able to extend anything like that for these participants as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And my email is on that handout. Everybody has different situations and different needs and different skill sets. So if there's anything I can help with, whether that's, creating a video for your church or giving training on something specific, more in depth than we were able to get into in this session, or even just answering questions that maybe didn't get answered in this one. I also use a lot of MIDI. I'm the music director and choir director first and foremost before I, figured out any of this stuff. And so I have been playing around with kind of how to best record my piano into GarageBand, how to get the singers from the videos, how to mess with their sound to make it sound nice, kind of things that I added on to my repertoire as I learned more. So if you, are already at that level and would like to get some tips on any of that stuff, I would be more than happy to talk with you about this and kind of geek out over it with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. I hope that you came away with another toolbox or another tool in your toolbox for how to try creating a virtual choir.